I'm Marin Liu, 32, a personal image consultant. The banquet hall pulsed with too many voices and too little sincerity. I hadn't wanted to come, but when Aunt Yvonne makes a dinner mandatory, no becomes a declaration of war. It was the annual Liu family Lunar New Year dinner, floor-length red silk tablecloths, crystal vases filled with gold-dusted chrysanthemums, and name cards placed with surgical passive aggression. The room smelled of lacquered duck, sour plum wine, and old expectations. I sat at the far end, near the kitchen swing doors. It was where they always put the non-lawyers, the not married, the not rich. A cousin once called it the overflow corner, and even though I made six figures helping some of the most powerful people in the world not look ridiculous in public, they still thought of me as the girl who plays dress-up for a living. Aunt Yvonne raised her glass for a toast. Her bangles clinked louder than her words. To family, she said, and to real careers. Let's give a round of applause to Edward for passing the bar, and to Valerie for making junior partner, doctors, lawyers, architects, true pride of our name. Everyone clapped. I pressed a polite smile onto my face and reached for my wine. The server walked by and paused, tray wobbling. "You're not on the main list, miss," he said quietly. "I was told to only serve the premium bottles to the first two tables." My smile dropped half a centimeter. Understood. He left before I could reply. Then my cousin Lily leaned across the table, her voice syrupy. "So, Marin, still doing wardrobe stuff? Or did you get a real job yet?" The table chuckled. Even my younger brother Darren looked away. I could feel the heat creep up my neck. But I just nodded and said, "Still helping people look the way they want to be seen." "You mean like dressing people for TikTok?" one of the uncles muttered. I stayed silent, slicing my steamed sea bass as if it had wronged me. If you've ever been in a room full of people who raised you, yet somehow can't see you drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from, hit like or subscribe. If you've ever been talked over at your own table, like your presence was the punchline. The doors to the banquet hall opened just as someone started telling a story about how Darren built a whole AI team at his fintech firm. A hush swept through the room, not polite, not practiced. A silence that hit the gut. In walked a woman dressed in deep velvet, heels clicking like clock hands. Her hair was braided in gold thread. But it wasn't her that everyone was staring at, it was the man behind her. He wore a crown, not a plastic one, not novelty, a real one, gold, spiked, heavy, regal, familiar, because it was Prince Benedict of Estelenza. I stood up slowly, napkin falling from my lap. My stomach didn't quite catch up to the rest of me. He walked directly toward my table, toward me. The air changed. People sat straighter. Aunt Yvonne's mouth went dry mid-sentence. Benedict smiled, extended his hand to me, and said in perfect royal accented English, "Miss Liu, I had to stop by and thank you in person. You saved my reputation during the summit. I owe you my public image." The silence sharpened into disbelief, and I could feel it, how the entire table turned toward me at once, like iron to a magnet. The room didn't breathe. I don't think I did, either. For a full 10 seconds, all I could hear was the hum of the chandeliers and the faint sound of someone's chopsticks hitting a porcelain plate. Benedict held my hand just long enough for it to matter. Not long enough to cause scandal, but long enough to make every aunt and cousin recalibrate who I was. And then, gently, he turned to the others, smiling that media-trained but not insincere smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. No one spoke. "You're very welcome," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't expect you to come all this way. I was in town." And this, He gestured around the room with a kind of amused curiosity seemed worth the detour. He turned back to me. I also brought something, as promised. He handed me a small rectangular envelope, thick, cream-colored, embossed with a wax seal bearing the crest of Estelenza. My fingertips brushed against the seal. I didn't open it. Not yet. But I knew what it was. The letter of recommendation. The personal endorsement I'd helped craft, but never thought he'd actually deliver in person. "It's all there," he said with a wink. "Don't forget to read the PS." And then, just as casually as he entered, he nodded to the room again and left. Still no one spoke. I sat down slowly. My chair creaked. Darren was staring at me like I'd just turned into a unicorn. Aunt Yvonne looked like she was trying to do mental math on what exactly image consultant meant when princes were involved. I slid the envelope into my clutch and reached for the wine bottle. The premium one. The server didn't hesitate this time. "You know him?" Lily finally asked, voice smaller now. "I work with him on clothes, on presence, image, crisis strategy, presentation, how he walks, talks, looks, how he's perceived on the world stage. But he's a prince. He's also a client." Her mouth opened, then closed. I turned to Darren, raising an eyebrow. "Still want to trade tables?" He shook his head. For the rest of the dinner, people kept trying to casually ask questions. What kind of royals? What other clients? I smiled, answered nothing. They were all suddenly so curious, and so polite. But it was a false warmth. And I'd seen it too many times in too many dressing rooms, behind too many cameras, with too many fragile people wearing million-dollar smiles. What they wanted wasn't me, it was proximity to something shiny. After dessert, I slipped away to the balcony. It was quiet outside, mist rising over the koi pond in the courtyard. My breath fogged the air. I let myself exhale the truth. Because what they didn't know, what I didn't tell them, was that 2 years ago, I nearly quit. I had been living in a studio apartment in Echo Park, taking whatever styling gigs I could get. Commercial shoots, low-budget red carpet prep. Once, a pet food brand hired me to make a golden retriever look presidential. I laughed, but I did it, because I needed rent. I'd started my business with nothing but a suitcase full of thrift store finds, a borrowed steamer, and a Rolodex of actors' assistants. The worst part wasn't the hustle. It was how everyone in my family reacted. My dad, before he passed, told me gently, "I just want you to have health insurance." My mom, every phone call. "You know, your cousin's firm is hiring. You could still go back to school." And at every family event, I'd show up in sleek black, hair tied up, wearing heels that hurt by the second hour because if I couldn't impress them with my job title, I could at least dress like someone important. It never worked. To them, I was still the art school dropout who wasted her potential playing dress-up. They couldn't see what I was building. I barely could. Until one day, I got a call. A journalist I'd styled for a local morning show passed my name to her friend, who passed it to her agent, who passed it to a nervous European aristocrat trying to navigate American media. It started with a Zoom call, then a flight, then a series of miraculous, chaotic weeks that ended with a man named Prince Benedict walking confidently into a UN gala in a tailored Navy suit, greeting Michelle Obama with ease and shaking hands with oil executives like he wasn't terrified inside. He texted me after, "You turned me from a meme into a monarch." It wasn't true, of course, but it was enough. Word spread, discreetly. My inbox filled up. Now I had 6 regular clients, 2 assistants, and a waitlist that stretched through next March. I lived in a downtown loft with a rooftop herb garden and a wine fridge I didn't know how to use. And yet, At that dinner table tonight, I'd felt 14 again. Small, quiet, invisible, until I wasn't. I pulled the envelope from my clutch and broke the seal. Inside was a short letter, handwritten, to whom it may concern. Miss Liu possesses the rare ability to transform presence without changing authenticity. In every public step I take, she has made me more myself, not less. I trust her with my reputation and my secrets. Yours sincerely, Benedict von Argen, Duke of Estelenza. I smiled, then turned the page. P.S. Tell your family you're not a stylist, you're a mirror, and some people are just afraid to look. I folded the letter and tucked it into the inside lining of my clutch. It didn't need to be framed. It didn't need to be flaunted. But it was mine, behind me. The glass door slid open. I turned, expecting a cousin or maybe Darren, but it was Aunt Yvonne. Her earrings glittered under the outdoor lights. "Is he really your client?" she asked, too directly. I nodded. "And, is it true? You teach him how to walk. I teach him how not to trip when the whole world is watching." She blinked. "Well, that's a gift." I waited. "I didn't know that's what you did," she said, quietly. "You never asked." Her eyes flicked to the envelope. "I didn't realize it was real. I mean, I thought it was just colors and fabrics." I didn't reply. There was nothing to add. "Well," she said, "it's impressive. I'm impressed." Then she left. The koi pond bubbled below. One of the fish surfaced. A flash of orange. I reached for my phone. Not to post. Not to prove anything, just to set a reminder for a client meeting tomorrow. And maybe, for the first time, I didn't care if they thought my job was embarrassing, because the only person I needed to convince had already bowed. The next morning, I woke up to 9 missed calls and a string of texts that read like a slow-burning apology. From cousin Lily Hay, about last night. "You looked amazing. Really. Like Vogue or something. Is he really a prince? Like, born in a castle. Just wondering, are you free to look at my wedding dress options I haven't bought yet?" From Darren, "You still doing clients in finance? Asking for a colleague. He's hosting a big London summit and needs polish." Mom also said she didn't know what image consultant meant. She Googled it. From Aunt Yvonne, family brunch on Sunday. "Bring your business cards. And that red lipstick. You wore it better than Valerie." I didn't respond to any of them. Not right away. The truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. The sting had dulled into something quieter. Like when you touch a bruise that's almost healed, still tender, but no longer aching. I made tea, sat by the floor-to-ceiling window in my loft, sunlight washing over my bare legs. The view wasn't much, just rooftops and power lines, but it was mine, every inch of it. Paid for by the hours I spent building reputations from the shadows. I opened my work calendar. Back-to-back sessions this week. One actress prepping for her first Oscar nomination. One politician whose team begged me to help her look less robotic without losing authority. And one billionaire's wife, rebranding after a quiet divorce. Then, tucked in the corner, lunch with B Tuesday, 12:30 p.m., Chateau Marmont. I hadn't accepted it yet. His assistant always sent these calendar blocks like friendly dares. I took a long sip of tea and pressed confirm. The restaurant patio was half-shaded by bougainvillea, and the servers wore black masks with silver pins. Los Angeles pretends not to care about royalty. But even here. The other diners paused when Benedict entered. Not because of the crown, he never wore that outside formal engagements, but because of the presence. That slow, assured walk. The open but reserved eye contact. The watch on his wrist. Slightly loosened so it looked effortless. Every detail calibrated. Every element intentional. I'd taught him all of it. He waved, slid into the seat across from me, and said without preamble, "Your aunt looks like she eats fear for breakfast." She does. I adored her. You're a sick man. He laughed, leaned back, and unbuttoned his blazer just enough for his posture to look casual but not lazy. I studied him. "What did you come for?" "Benedict, really. I told you, to keep my promise, and to let them see what you are." I blinked, thrown by the simplicity of it. He picked up a sugar packet, rotated it between his fingers. "There are 3 kinds of people in this world, Marin. People who need the light on them, people who hide from it, and people like you, the ones who shape it. I'm not flattered. You don't need to be. You're necessary." I looked down at the tablecloth. "They'll forget. You know, my family. This high. It'll pass." He raised an eyebrow. And I'm not sure if I care anymore." "Then congratulations," he said. "You've arrived. That Sunday." I did go to the family brunch. Not because I wanted validation, not because I wanted revenge, just because I could. And I had nothing to hide anymore. I wore wide-leg cream trousers, a silk blouse that flowed like water, and no jewelry except the antique watch my father left me. When I walked in, the room paused, but not in shock this time, in recognition. Aunt Yvonne didn't insult my shoes. Darren made space at the table without being asked. Lily didn't whisper to Valerie when I passed by. For once, no one tried to finish my sentences. They just listened. Over waffles and bitter coffee. They asked questions, not the mocking kind, but real ones. How do you build trust with high-profile clients? What do you do when someone's image falls apart in the press? Do you sign NDAs? Have you ever had to walk away? I answered some, dodged others, let silences stretch without filling them, because I had nothing to prove anymore. Still, about halfway through the meal, Uncle Thomas asked the one question I wasn't expecting. "What made you start?" he said, pushing up his glasses. What made you choose this?" The table quieted. I folded my napkin slowly. "When I was a kid," I said, "you all used to make fun of me for changing outfits 5 times a day." Lily nodded guiltily. "But what none of you knew," I continued, "was that I was trying to match the mood. If I was sad, I dressed soft. If I felt invisible, I wore red. If I wanted to disappear, I wore gray." No one spoke. I didn't know how to say what I felt back then. I admitted. So I wore it instead. I took a breath. And later, I realized other people needed that too. They just didn't know how to ask for it. Uncle Thomas nodded slowly. "That's actually beautiful." I shrugged. "It's practical. But thank you." The conversation shifted after that, not toward me, but outward toward the world. And I didn't mind. I'd had my moment. That was enough. Later that week, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Just a box. Square and plain. Inside a small plaque, carved from dark wood, engraved in a deep serif font. "The mirror is not for them. It's for you." Beneath it was a note, handwritten in the familiar slanted script of Benedict's aide. "His Highness says thank you for the clarity. You may decline the next invitation, he'll understand." I laughed softly. Because I wouldn't decline. Not yet. Not until the work was done. But I understood what he meant. My worth wasn't measured by how many people saw me shine. It was measured by how deeply I saw myself before anyone else did. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't dressing to prove anything. I wasn't speaking to be heard. I was just standing in my own light. And it felt like enough. 3 weeks passed. No banquets, no brunches, just quiet workdays blurred by coffee, fittings, private jet schedules, and confidentiality agreements. My days belong to others, other bodies, other faces, other reputations. But the nights were mine. One night, around 10:30, I sat barefoot on the cool tile of my kitchen floor, scrolling through a client's damage control plan when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. It's Helena. I'm at the Mondrian. Can you come? I need fixing. No last name needed. Just Helena. Helena Dumaret, heiress, actress, global face of 3 luxury brands, and a headline waiting to happen. We'd worked together 6 months ago when her ex leaked a recording that nearly derailed her film premiere. She'd cried in my hotel suite for 3 hours, and I never brought it up again. I replied simply, "Be there in 20. I threw on black wide-leg trousers, a fitted blazer, no makeup. Let the quiet strength speak instead." When I arrived at the Mondrian, she was in the penthouse bathroom, curled on the floor in a champagne-colored robe, mascara streaked, hair wild. The table was covered in empty mini-bar bottles and an untouched fruit tray. "Your security team let me in," I said softly. She didn't look up. "I'm disgusting," she whispered. "No," I said, kneeling beside her. "You're just leaking." Her shoulders trembled. "They said I looked high in the promo shoot." I wasn't. I was just tired. And now everyone's calling me the next Lindsay. I handed her a glass of water. "You're not Lindsay. You're Helena. And you don't need to be fixed. You need to be remembered." She finally met my eyes. Remembered for what? For surviving all this with your soul intact. Silence stretched between us. She sipped the water, slowly straightened her spine. I found a brush, smoothed out the snarls in her hair, wiped off the smudged makeup with warm cloths. We didn't talk about the internet, or the brands, or the upcoming charity gala. I just sat with her, held the silence like a shield. That's what they never understood: my family, the world, even some of my clients. Image consulting isn't about vanity, it's about mercy. Later, when she'd fallen asleep under a cashmere throw, I texted her assistant a list of instructions and slipped out into the dark. I didn't cry, but I felt something old. The ache of being the one who carries everything for everyone, silently. I'd built a life tending to the emotional wounds that no one sees, and sometimes the weight of it felt impossible, but I wouldn't trade it, not anymore. The next morning, I woke to another text from Darren. "Got time for lunch today? Just you and me? No suits. I'll even pay." I hesitated. He never asked for time alone. We weren't the talk-it-out siblings. We were more nod across the room at weddings and silently split a bottle of soy sauce at family dinners type. "Still," I replied, 12:30. "Little Tokyo, don't be late." He arrived 2 minutes early, which for Darren was practically sentimental. No tie, just a navy crewneck and khakis. Phone shoved deep in his pocket like he didn't want to reach for it. We ordered udon, shared gyoza, and for a while, we just ate. Then he set down his chopsticks and said, "So I Googled you." I nearly choked on my tea. "You what? You're on some insane list. Marin, top image consultants globally. Celebs are talking about you in blind items. You've got a profile." I shrugged. Most of it's exaggerated. He leaned in. "Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at my bowl. "Would you have listened?" Silence. Then, slowly, he said, "No, probably not." I appreciated the honesty. He tapped the edge of his bowl. "I guess I just didn't understand it. Still don't. Really. I mean, I design banking apps. It's numbers. You deal in perception. It's not that different," I said quietly. "We both build things that people trust, or don't." He looked at me then. Really looked. I think I was jealous. That stopped me. Jealous, I repeated. He nodded. You figured out who you were early. You didn't ask for permission. You just went. I blinked. I cried in a supply closet in my first studio apartment for 3 days straight when I couldn't afford light bulbs. Still, he said, you went. We didn't say much after that. But when the check came, he reached for it without argument. And for the first time in our adult lives, I let him. That weekend, a client invited me to a black-tie charity gala. Normally, I'd decline. But something tugged at me, a sense that I needed to be seen, not for vanity, but for clarity. I wore a backless black gown, hair pinned in a soft wave, no necklace. Let the dress speak. Let my posture finish the sentence. Halfway through the night, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Aunt Yvonne, I didn't expect to see you here, she said, voice low. I sipped my champagne. I was invited. She looked around the room, movie stars, politicians, philanthropists. By whom the host? Her eyes narrowed slightly. You look different. I am. A pause. Then, to my surprise, she said, I was wrong. You know, about what you do, about who you are. I didn't reply. She continued, voice strained. It's not easy to admit that, but I've been watching, listening. People talk about you now. Real people. Important ones. Everyone's important. I said. She sighed. Yes, but you know what I mean. I did. Then she asked something that surprised me more than anything else. Do you think you could help Valerie? I blinked. Your daughter. She's lost. She made partner, but she doesn't know how to carry it. She's all blazers and buzzwords, but no presence. I looked at her. Presence doesn't come from posture. It comes from peace. She nodded. Exactly. But how do you give that I don't give it? I help people remember it. Aunt Yvonne looked away, ashamed or perhaps humbled. Would you consider it? I took another sip. Have her call me. Not you. If she wants help, she has to ask. Fair enough, she murmured. And then she left. The soft rustle of her gown trailing behind her like a question she was finally ready to ask. Later that night, as I stood near the balcony looking out over the glittering skyline, someone approached from behind. May I, said a familiar voice. I turned. Benedict. You never stop surprising me, he said. I'm not trying to. Exactly. We stood in silence for a moment. He glanced at the crowd. You ever get tired of shaping other people only when they don't listen? He smiled. But what about you? Marin, who shapes you? I looked out at the lights. No one. I said. I just hold the mirror. And that was enough. It was almost midnight when I got home. The heels came off first. Then the earrings. I sat on the edge of my bed, back still straight from hours of being watched. My reflection in the mirror across the room didn't flinch. That was the funny thing about learning how to be looked at eventually. You stop reacting to your own image. I had a dozen unread emails and a voicemail from a luxury watch brand rep, but I didn't touch my phone. Not yet. Instead, I opened the window. The city buzzed below, neon signs blinking like tired eyes, sirens somewhere distant, the occasional laugh rising from the street like a secret no one was supposed to hear. The night didn't ask anything of me. It just existed. I let the cold air wrap around my shoulders. My thoughts drifted to Valerie. We hadn't spoken in years. Not really. Childhood birthdays and family events? Sure. But never one-on-one. Not since high school, when she was already interning at law firms while I was sketching dresses on the backs of receipt paper. We'd never fought. That would have required intimacy. We'd just dismissed each other. And now Aunt Yvonne was asking me to fix her. Or rather, help her. But that's not how it works. People don't grow when someone else pulls the strings. They grow when they untangle their own knots. I climbed into bed, wrapped myself in the sheets, and finally picked up my phone. One new message. Unknown number. Hi, Marin. This is Valerie. Mom said I could reach out. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, but I guess I need help. Not with clothes, just with me. Please call when you can. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, tomorrow, noon. No suits, no notes. Just come as you are. She arrived early. I was already seated at our corner booth at the quiet tea house in Silver Lake. No makeup, soft sweater, no jewelry. The version of me that clients never saw but friends sometimes did when I had time to be a person. Valerie walked in like she was defending a case. Pantsuit, sleek bun, leather portfolio clutched tight like a weapon. She scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over. Hi, she said, a little breathless. Sit, I said gently. You don't need to perform. She slid in across from me, unspeaking for a moment. Then, I don't know how to start this. Start where it hurts. Her eyes welled instantly. I made partner. I should feel proud. Everyone says I should be proud, but all I feel is like I'm drowning in someone else's life. I didn't interrupt. She continued, voice thinner now. I don't know who I am anymore. I wear power suits, but feel like a ghost. My boyfriend left 6 months ago. I didn't cry. I just scheduled more meetings. Because that's what was expected. Because I didn't know what else to do. We sat in silence. The server brought tea, which we didn't touch. Then I asked, when's the last time you made a decision no one else understood, but you did anyway? She blinked. I don't remember. Then that's where we begin. Over the next few weeks, Valerie and I met once a week. I never called it coaching. She didn't ask for worksheets or mantras. We just talked. I asked questions she hadn't been asked since she was a teenager. What colors make you feel less like your mother? What music do you play when no one's home? What did you used to dream about before everything had to be smart and safe? She didn't know the answers, but she started looking for them. One afternoon, she showed up in jeans and a soft orange cardigan. No makeup, no laptop, just her. I listened to old voice memos of myself from college. She said quietly, I was so bold back then, so unafraid. You're still her? I said. No, she whispered. I buried her. Then let's dig. Meanwhile, my own life kept spinning. Helena landed a Vogue cover and texted me at 2 a.m. just to say, I felt like me again. Benedict sent me a photo of his mother, the Queen, wearing the pin I'd chosen for her birthday gala. His caption read, she said, I've grown into my name. You did that. And Darren. He started dating again. Softly, tentatively, like someone testing ice. He called to say he was seeing someone who wasn't impressive on paper, but made him laugh without effort. I told him that was the best kind of power. He didn't even argue. My family, for all their faults, had started treating me differently, not just as someone they respected, but someone they saw. But it was strange. The more they respected me, the less I needed it. And that, I realized, was the real shift. It had never been about getting recognition. It had been about outgrowing the need for it. 2 months after the dinner party, Valerie invited me to her apartment. She was hosting a small gathering, just 6 people. No catered trays, no formal attire. Just candles, soft music, a few bottles of wine, and laughter that didn't feel strained. She introduced me to her friends as the one who reminded me I still have a soul. I laughed, waved it off. But later, as I helped her stack plates in the kitchen, she looked at me and said, thank you for not treating me like I was broken. You weren't, I said. You were just blurred. She smiled. Do you think I could do what you do? Help people see themselves again? Yeah. I paused. You already started. That night, back in my own apartment. I sat by the window again. The city hadn't changed. Still loud, messy, indifferent. But I had. I didn't need a prince walking into a room anymore. I didn't need to prove myself to a table full of people waiting to mock me. I just needed this quiet clarity and the steady, unapologetic rhythm of becoming more myself. A few days later, I received an envelope, heavy paper, foreign stamp, inside a gold-edged invitation from the Royal House of Estelenza, a gala, black tie, benefiting diplomatic arts initiatives. My name was printed in raised ink, Ms. Marin Liu, Consultant of Cultural Image and Public Presence. I almost laughed at the title. Consultant of Cultural Image. It sounded made up. It was made up. By me. And yet, here it was, legitimized in gold. I set it on my desk and stared at it for a while. Most people would have jumped at the chance. An event like this, the kind of thing people spend years angling for, begging publicists and agencies to pull strings. And here I was, already on the list. But part of me hesitated. Not because I was ungrateful, not because I didn't want to go. I just wondered, who was I dressing for now? Who would I be in that room? That night, I texted Benedict. Gala invite, received? Undecided. He replied immediately, it won't be the same without you. But only come if you want to be seen. Not for me. For you. He understood. He always did. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed, send my regards to the crown. I'll be there. 3 weeks later. I stood at the foot of the grand staircase in the Royal Opera House of Estelenza. It was like something out of a painting. Marble pillars, candlelit chandeliers, violins echoing against velvet walls. I wore midnight blue, a gown with structure and shadow. No sparkles, no plunging neckline. Just clean lines and silence. My hair was parted to the side, pinned low. A single antique brooch clipped at the shoulder, an heirloom from my grandmother, who once told me, don't ask to be taken seriously. Dress like you already are. The room was full of people who lived in headlines, ambassadors, designers, former royalty, rising stars. Every dress more elaborate than the last. And yet, as I entered, heads turned. Not in spectacle, in recognition. Because I didn't wear the dress. I inhabited it. I moved slowly, gracefully, like someone who knew the rules and had long ago chosen which ones to ignore. Near the champagne table, I spotted a familiar face. Valerie. She looked incredible. Soft green silk, a natural curl in her hair, minimal makeup. She carried herself like she wasn't apologizing for being visible anymore. She walked over, glass in hand. I didn't know if I could pull this off. She said, you're not pulling anything off. I replied, you're showing up. She smiled. Same to you. We didn't linger long. We didn't need to. We weren't here to prove anything. Later, as the orchestra began its second piece, Benedict approached. He looked regal, of course, but not stiff. A man who knew how to hold weight without collapsing under it. I was told you arrived without fanfare, he said, offering his arm. Fanfare is for politicians and pop stars, not mirrors. He laughed and led me toward the upper balcony. We stood side by side, overlooking the room. You remember the first time we worked together, he asked. You were late, and you were wearing beige. A crime. He smiled. You told me I looked like a tired bank lobby. Because you did. And you said, it's not just about what you wear. It's about what you choose to say when you walk into the room. I still believe that. He nodded. So what are you saying tonight? I thought about it. I'm saying I don't need to be asked who I am anymore. He turned to look at me, softly. That's the loudest thing you've ever said. After the gala, I didn't fly back immediately. I stayed a few extra days in Estelenza, walked through old stone streets, sat alone in cafes. Let the city speak to me in its own quiet dialect. No one recognized me. No one cared what I did. I was anonymous again, and it felt like rest. One afternoon, I visited a museum tucked between two bookshops. It was nearly empty. Inside, a wing dedicated to mirrors throughout history. Venetian, Egyptian, 16th century Spanish bronze, some smooth, some fractured, all once held by people trying to understand who they were. I stood in front of one, cracked down the middle. Its plaque read, "Discovered in the ruins of a noblewoman's estate, believed to have been used during mourning." I studied my reflection, split in two by time, and I thought how many women have stood before mirrors asking, not, "How do I look?" but "Will they see me today?" And then, does it matter if they don't? When I finally flew home, the city greeted me with its usual buzz, emails, meetings, voicemail from an actress spiraling over a photo that didn't go viral. I handled it. Soft voice, sharp edits, invisible repairs, back to work, back to life. But something had shifted. Not around me, inside me. I no longer bent my life around the opinions of people who only knew how to categorize. I no longer feared the word embarrassing, because I understood what embarrassed people most: freedom. The freedom to be exactly who you are, without explanation, without apology. The freedom to succeed in a language they never bothered to learn. One evening, while preparing a lookbook for a new client, I got a call from my mother. We hadn't talked in a while. Not deeply. She said, "I saw your name in an article. Something about power dressers. You were quoted." "Yes," I said. A pause. "I used to worry about you. You know," she said, "not because I didn't believe in you, but because I didn't understand the world you were building." "I know." Another pause. "I do now," she said. And that was it. No grand apology, just acknowledgement. And somehow, it was more than enough. Weeks later, I returned to the same family dinner where this all began. Different location, same players, same red tablecloths, same gold trim. But something subtle had changed. When I arrived, they didn't ask what I did. They asked how I was. They didn't talk about me in third person. They talked to me. And when someone made a joke about influencers being the new royalty, no one laughed too hard. Especially not Aunt Yvonne, because now they knew. I wasn't chasing a seat at their table. I'd built my own. And if they wanted to join me there, they were welcome. But I didn't need them to. Near the end of the meal, Darren raised a toast. "To family," he said, "to the ones who succeed quietly, love loudly, and teach us how to show up even when we're underestimated." Everyone raised their glass, and for the first time, I didn't flinch, because I knew that toast was for me, and I no longer had to earn it. I just had to receive it. Spring came fast in Los Angeles. One week the air was still sharp and gray. The next, everything smelled like jacaranda and pavement. In my line of work, the seasons didn't matter, not in the way they did for farmers or teachers. But something about this one felt different. I'd started saying no, not dramatically, not angrily, just clearly. No to last-minute calls from clients who treated me like a personal therapist with a wardrobe. No to distant cousins who only called when they wanted to grab coffee and pick my brain. No to panels with glossy titles like Empowering Women in Branding, where I'd be the only one not using a pitch deck. Saying no gave me time, and with time came space. I used it to walk, not for steps, not for weight, but for distance from expectation, from noise, from the version of me I used to bend into for approval. One Saturday morning, I walked to the old neighborhood I used to live in, the tiny Echo Park studio with a window that faced a wall. The building was still there, though it had been repainted. The iron gate freshly polished. I stood across the street and stared at the balcony that had once held a dying ficus and a plastic chair I found in an alley. I remembered the girl who lived there, hungry, humble, determined, terrified. She used to wake up at 5 a.m. to get to shoots before sunrise, used to cry in the bathroom after getting paid in exposure and experience, used to wear the same black blazer 4 times a week and hope no one noticed. I wanted to tell her that it worked, that her belief in something no one else understood had carved a future no one else could have imagined. That even though no one clapped for her at the time, she would one day walk into a room and silence it, not with noise, but with presence. But she wouldn't have believed me. Not yet. The next day, I got a call from Helena, not a crisis call, not a panic. Just, I'm getting married. In 6 months. I want you to be part of it. I smiled. To style you. No, she said. To walk me down the aisle. I froze. My father can't make it, she continued. And my brother. Well, you know. But you held me when I felt like nothing. You saw me. Not the headline. Me. I didn't know what to say. So I said, I'd be honored. And I meant it. Around the same time, Benedict sent me an envelope. No wax seal, no fanfare, just a letter on plain stationery. Dear Marin, I've decided to step back. Not from duty, but from publicness. You've taught me how to lead without needing a stage. That might be your most powerful lesson. I will, of course, still need you if you'll have me, but perhaps less often, perhaps more quietly. Thank you for giving me a version of myself I could actually live in. Yours. B. I held the letter for a long time. I didn't feel abandoned. I didn't feel sad. I felt released. Because even the most visible people need to retreat. And maybe, just maybe, I had helped someone choose peace over performance. That week, I was featured in a magazine. The Woman Behind the Curtain. The Invisible Hands Shaping Power. I didn't write the title. I didn't love it. But I liked the photos understated. Black and white. No glitz. The article painted me as a mystery, a whisperer of presence, a modern oracle with a steamer in one hand and a 1,000-yard stare, but they missed the most important part. I wasn't mysterious. I was clear. And that, in this world, made me rare. A month later, I hosted a dinner. Not a gala. Not a brand event. Just a dinner. My table. My menu. 10 people. Darren and his new girlfriend came. Valerie brought someone too soft-spoken, kind, a painter. Lily didn't come, but she sent a message that said, "You make it look easy. I know it's not. Respect." Even Aunt Yvonne showed up. She wore a simple dress and brought a pie she didn't make but claimed she had. It didn't matter. What mattered was the tone. No one competed. No one asked about titles. We passed dishes, poured wine, told stories that didn't center around accomplishments. We existed together. That was enough. Later, while clearing plates, Valerie stood beside me at the sink and said, "You changed everything." "No," I replied. "I just refused to play the old game." She nodded. "Still, you gave us permission." That word permission landed somewhere deep in my chest, because for so long, that's what I had needed too, and no one gave it. So I took it. And maybe that was the most powerful thing I ever wore. The next morning, I woke early. The house was quiet. My phone was silent. I poured coffee, stepped onto the balcony, and let the sunlight warm my face. No urgent calls, no performance, just morning. And in that moment, I felt full, not with pride, not with triumph, but with a soft, steady knowing that I no longer needed to walk into rooms hoping to be recognized, because the only recognition I needed was already in the quiet between each breath. In the mirror, no longer a question, just me. The final time I visited my old family home, I arrived without a coat, though it was early winter, the kind of cold that doesn't bite, but lingers, settling into your elbows and your breath. I didn't need the warmth. I was carrying enough of it inside me. The house looked the same, peeling shutters, ceramic wind chimes on the porch that hadn't moved since I was 10. I hadn't stepped inside in over a year, not since the dinner that changed everything. My mother had asked me to come. No reason. Just, "You should see what I've done with the living room." And there was something in her voice, uncertain, quiet, that told me to say yes. When I opened the front door, the scent hit me first. Sandalwood, jasmine, and a faint trace of old paper. The living room had been rearranged. The heavy cabinet that once held family trophies was gone. The framed photos were still there. Graduations, weddings, baby pictures, but rearranged. With no hierarchy now. Just people. As they were. And in the center of the room, where the old china hutch used to be, stood something I hadn't seen in years. A mirror. My mirror. The one from my Echo Park studio. I hadn't even realized she'd kept it. The frame was chipped, the glass slightly warped from moisture, but it still held the same soft reflection, the kind that didn't judge, that simply offered back what was already there. My mother stepped in from the hallway. She wore an apron stained with turmeric and something sweet. "I cleaned it," she said, nodding at the mirror. "It was in the garage." I ran my fingers along the wooden frame. "You always hated this thing," I said softly. I didn't understand it, and now I don't need to. That, I think, was the real apology. We ate soup at the kitchen table. Something with ginger and mushrooms and soba noodles. She didn't ask about clients. I didn't mention headlines. We talked about little things, how Valerie was dating a painter, how Darren might propose soon, how Aunt Yvonne had joined a yoga class and kept calling it breath politics. Then, after a lull, my mother looked at me and said, "I used to think success was something loud." I set my spoon down. She continued, "That it came with claps, awards, announcements, a pause. But you built something quieter, and somehow, it moves people more." I swallowed. "Thank you," I said. She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. "I see you now, Marin." And for the first time in my life, I believed her. That night, I walked home instead of calling a car. The air was crisp, the sky bruised with early evening. I passed the corner bakery that used to sell day-old croissants in paper bags. The park bench where I once sat crying after a client ghosted me. The bus stop where I rehearsed how to tell my parents I wasn't going back to school. All still there, all still whispering. But I was different. I didn't carry the old shame anymore. I didn't flinch at my reflection in glass. I'd learned that being underestimated wasn't a curse. It was camouflage. It gave me time to become dangerous in peace. 3 weeks later, I got a message from Helena. A photo. Her wedding day. She stood on a stone path, veil catching wind, face glowing not from makeup but from that rarest thing in Hollywood peace. Beside her stood me, hand in hand, walking her forward. No title, no entourage, just two women who knew what it meant to fall apart in silence and rebuild without spectacle. I framed the photo, placed it in my office, a reminder that presence doesn't come from attention, it comes from alignment. In April, Valerie launched her own practice, not a law firm, a consultancy. She called it unscripted. She didn't ask for my help naming it. She didn't need to. She sent me the announcement via text. You made me remember the version of myself that didn't need a podium. I want to help other women find that version too. I stared at the message a long time. Then I replied, You already have. One night. I stood in front of the mirror again. The same one. The warped glass. The uneven corners. The faint line running through the center that had always split me in two. Except this time, I didn't see a fracture. I saw layers. Past, present, possibility. I saw a woman who had once been called embarrassing, and I saw a woman who had been called essential. Both true, both hers. And I felt, at last, at ease with the duality. I didn't need everyone to understand. I didn't need anyone to clap, because I knew something they didn't. The real work, the good work, the holy, powerful, irrevocable work. It happens in rooms with no cameras, in conversations no one else hears, in outfits that feel like skin and silence, in showing up when you're invisible and leaving a mark when no one saw you arrive. At my next family dinner, I wore gray, soft wool, long sleeves, no statement earrings. I wasn't trying to prove anything. And still, when I walked in, they made space. Not because of a crown, not because of a title, but because they could feel it now. That I didn't belong at the table. I defined it, and that was enough.